Step back from that door. Hands where I can see them. What are you doing here?
I work here. Janitorial supervisor. My company ID is on my chest.
At 5:43 a.m., show me real ID.
You're staring at my badge and my keys. What's the suspicion? My job or my skin?
Don't make this about race.
You already did when you assumed a worker.
Officer Brandon Miller had been with the Atlanta Police Department for only 9 months when he made a decision that would cost the city $100,000 and permanently end his law enforcement career. One quiet morning in the Buckhead district, everything changed. I was that man in the safety vest, unlocking the door to my workplace, conducting my final inspection as my night shift neared its end, just as I had done hundreds of times before. No crime, no break-in, no suspicious behavior, just me finishing my work. But Officer Miller saw me and made an assumption based on nothing but the early hour and his own racial bias. That assumption triggered a confrontation that would lead to my unlawful detention, the humiliation of a hard-working supervisor, and a lawsuit that exposed how quickly bias turns routine situations into constitutional violations. Before I continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time hearing my story, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Downtown Atlanta, specifically the Buckhead Business District, is where glass skyscrapers line the quiet streets. The Pinnacle Center sits on a corner of Peachtree Road, a 15-story structure housing law firms, tech startups, and medical practices. The street-level entrance features heavy glass doors with the building name displayed in polished gold letters. At night and early morning, the area is nearly deserted, except for security and janitorial staff like myself. It was 5:43 in the morning on a Wednesday in early November. The sky was still pitch black, with dawn approaching in about an hour. The temperature had dropped to roughly 48 degrees during the night, chilly for Georgia, cool enough to warrant a hoodie. Streetlights cast amber illumination along empty sidewalks. A few luxury cars sat parked along the curbs. The city was experiencing that hush before the chaos of rush hour begins. My name is Andre Robinson. I had been a janitorial supervisor for Apex Facility Solutions for 8 years, managing night shift crews that cleaned office buildings throughout the city. I supervised 14 employees across 4 high-rises, ensuring quality work, managing supplies, and handling client concerns. My company trusted me with master keys to every building I serviced. My clients consistently praised my professionalism and reliability. That Wednesday morning, I was nearing the end of my night shift. I'd clocked in at the company office at 10 p.m. the previous evening, supervised my crews throughout the night, and was now conducting my final building inspection before my shift ended at 6 a.m. I wore my company-issued high-visibility neon safety vest over a gray hoodie that kept me warm during the cool autumn night. I carried my heavy ring of building keys, and I had my company ID badge clipped prominently to my vest, displaying my photograph name, job title, and the Apex Facility Solutions logo. I was 36 years old, married with 2 young sons. I'd worked in building maintenance and janitorial services since I was 19, starting as an entry-level cleaner and grinding my way up to supervisor. I took immense pride in my work and my reputation. My bosses at Apex described me as their anchor, the most dependable supervisor on the payroll. My crews respected my leadership. I walked to the Pinnacle Center entrance, selected the correct key from my ring, and began unlocking the door for my final inspection. This was my daily ritual. Unlock the building conduct, final quality checks of my crew's overnight work, verify supplies were stocked, and then head home to my family. I'd done this hundreds of times at this specific location without a single incident. But Brandon Miller saw something different. Officer Brandon Miller was 23 years old with barely 9 months on the Atlanta Police Department. He'd graduated from the academy the previous February after completing standard training. I learned later through the lawsuit discovery that his academy performance was technically adequate with passing scores across all categories. However, instructors had noted that while he showed enthusiasm, he had a troubling tendency to identify suspicious activity where experienced officers saw normal, lawful behavior. His field training officer, Officer Sarah Jenkins, with 18 years of experience on the force, had documented significant concerns during Miller's 16-week field training period. The records showed that Miller initiated multiple contacts with citizens based primarily on appearance and time of day rather than observable suspicious behavior. In one incident, he'd stopped a Latino man leaving a convenience store at 11 p.m., convinced of shoplifting despite the man holding visible receipts. The man was a painter buying Gatorade. In another incident, Miller questioned a black woman sitting in her parked car outside a condo complex, certain she was distributing narcotics. She was a pediatric nurse waiting to pick up her carpool. Officer Jenkins wrote a detailed evaluation strongly recommending Miller receive an additional 8 weeks of supervised patrol with an intensive focus on Fourth Amendment standards and recognizing implicit bias. Her evaluation stated, Officer Miller demonstrates enthusiasm but consistently initiates contacts based on demographic factors rather than observable suspicious behavior. Without significant additional training, Officer Miller poses a liability risk to the department and a civil rights risk to the community. Her recommendation was reviewed by the training coordinator and patrol commander. Both acknowledged the concerns. However, Miller had technically passed all competency standards. More significantly, the department was operating 50 officers short. Budget constraints had forced the cancellation of academy classes. Experienced officers were retiring faster than new ones could be trained. The decision was made to clear Miller for solo patrol after standard training with a mere notation that supervisors should monitor his contacts closely. He was assigned to the 3rd shift downtown patrol, given his own vehicle, and deployed independently. 23 years old, 9 months of total experience, documented bias patterns, and now working alone with full police authority. That Wednesday morning, Miller was near the end of an overnight shift that had been remarkably quiet. He'd responded to 1 minor fender bender, conducted 2 business checks, and completed paperwork. He was driving down Peachtree Road when his headlights illuminated a figure at the Pinnacle Center entrance. A man wearing a work vest over a hoodie was at the locked glass doors, manipulating the lock with keys. The time was 5:43 a.m. Dawn was approaching, but darkness still covered Atlanta. Most office workers wouldn't arrive for hours. In Miller's inadequately trained mind, operating through insufficient experience and unexamined bias, this registered as suspicious and potentially criminal. He didn't consider that janitorial staff work overnight hours. He didn't register the high-visibility safety vest or the ID badge. He saw what his bias told him to see a black man at a locked building in pre-dawn darkness. In his mind, that single observation constituted reasonable suspicion requiring investigation. Miller activated his emergency lights, pulled to the curb, activated his body camera, and stepped out. His mind had already constructed a narrative: possible burglary in progress, suspicious person attempting unauthorized entry. The narrative was built entirely on assumption without a single observed illegal act. Do you think officers should understand basic employment patterns like night shift work before making contact? Drop your answer below. I heard the car before I saw him. Officer Miller walked toward the building entrance where I stood with my key in the door. Hey, why are you prying at that door? I turned, genuinely surprised to see a police officer approaching aggressively. "It's my office," I said, my voice steady. "I work the night shift. I'm the janitorial supervisor." I gestured clearly to my safety vest with the company ID badge visible on my chest. At this hour, Miller's tone carried clear suspicion. "ID now." I pulled my key from the lock, confused by the immediate hostility. "I just grabbed my badge from inside my coat. That's why I'm unlocking it. My company ID is right here." I pointed to the badge clipped to my vest, clearly showing my name photo and the Apex Facility Solutions logo. "Step back from that door until I confirm who you are and what you're doing." I stepped back, my frustration rising. "Confirm what exactly? That a black man can't have keys to his own job. I'm standing here in a company vest with an ID badge, unlocking a building I have legal access to. What's suspicious about going to work?" "I didn't say anything about race," Miller responded defensively. "You didn't have to," I shot back. "You pulled up on me while I'm unlocking my workplace. You demanded ID when I'm wearing one. You told me to step back from my job. What part of this looks criminal to you except the color of my skin?" Miller's face reddened. "I'm responding to a potential break-in situation. Someone trying to enter a locked building before business hours." "Break-in," my voice rose slightly. "With keys, in a safety vest with a badge, do you think criminals unlock doors instead of breaking them? Do you think they wear reflective clothing with company identification?" "I need to verify your employment before you enter this building," he insisted. I pulled out my phone. "Fine. I'm calling my boss at Apex. He can verify I'm supposed to be here. And then I'm calling this building's management company to report that Atlanta PD is preventing their contracted supervisor from accessing the property." Miller shifted uncomfortably. He'd initiated this contact without reasonable suspicion, and now faced a person who clearly understood his rights and the absurdity of the situation. "Put the phone down. Let me see your ID. You've been looking at my ID for 2 minutes. It's clipped to my vest." I pointed again to the badge. "My name is Andre Robinson. I supervise janitorial staff for Apex Facility Solutions. We have a contract with this building. I have keys, access codes, and permission to be here. What else do you need to confirm?" Miller had no answer because there was no legitimate law enforcement reason for this contact, but he'd already committed to the interaction and couldn't back down without admitting he'd made a racially motivated stop. "Show me another form of ID, driver's license or state ID." "Why, I'm not driving. I'm not committing a crime. I'm standing at my workplace with my work ID. Under what legal authority are you demanding additional identification?" A Mercedes pulled into the parking lot behind us. A woman stepped out, late 50s, wearing sharp business attire despite the early hour. She walked quickly toward the building entrance. "Andre, is everything okay?" She looked at the officer with concern. "Ms. Caldwell," I said, relief evident in my voice, "this officer seems to think I'm breaking into the building." "Breaking in?" Diane Caldwell, property manager for the Pinnacle Center, looked at Miller with absolute disbelief. "Andre has been our janitorial supervisor for 3 years. He works the night shift. He's here finishing his final inspection before his shift ends. He has full access to this building. Why on earth would you think he's breaking in yet?" Miller stammered. "I saw someone trying to enter a locked building before dawn. I was investigating potential criminal activity." "Criminal activity?" Caldwell's voice hardened. "He's wearing an Apex vest with his ID badge clearly visible. He has keys to the building because we gave them to him. He's here at this time because that's when janitorial supervisors check their crew's work. This is his job. What about this situation suggested criminal activity?" Miller had no response. The property manager's arrival had exposed what I already knew. This stop had been based on nothing but bias. Caldwell pulled out her phone. Officer, what's your name and badge number? I'm calling your supervisor and our building's attorney. This is harassment of our contractor. Andre, go ahead and open the door. You have every right to be here, and this officer has no legal authority to prevent you from entering. Miller's face went pale. He'd stopped someone from accessing their workplace based on assumption, and now faced complaints from both the worker and the property owner. Ma'am, I was just doing my job. Your job isn't to harass people who are working legally. She snapped. Your job isn't to assume a black man with keys and an ID badge is a criminal. Your job is to know the difference between suspicious activity and someone going to work. A second patrol car arrived, called by Miller, when he realized the situation was escalating. Sergeant Mike Henderson stepped out, a 15-year veteran who'd seen enough bad stops to recognize one immediately. He assessed the scene quickly. A man in a janitorial vest with visible IDA property manager on her phone, looking angry, and his probationary officer looking panicked. What's going on here? Henderson asked, directing the question to everyone. Diane Caldwell answered first, her voice sharp. Your officer stopped our janitorial supervisor from entering the building he's contracted to clean. Despite his safety vest, despite his ID badge, despite having proper keys, he demanded additional identification and told Andre he couldn't enter his own workplace. Henderson turned to me. Sir, I'm Sergeant Henderson. Can you explain what happened from your perspective? My voice was calm but edged with anger. Sergeant, I'm Andre Robinson. I'm a supervisor for Apex Facility Solutions. I arrived at 5:40 to check on my crew's work in this building like I do every Wednesday. I was unlocking the door when your officer pulled up and started interrogating me. He demanded ID when I'm wearing my company badge. He told me to step back from the door. He suggested I was attempting a break-in, despite having keys and proper identification. The only thing he hasn't articulated is what actual suspicious behavior I was engaged in other than being black and going to work early. Henderson closed his eyes briefly. He knew exactly what had happened because he'd seen Miller's field training evaluations. The pattern was documented. The warnings had been given, and now that pattern had resulted in exactly what the training officer predicted. Mr. Robinson, I apologize on behalf of the department. You have every right to access your workplace, and you should not have been stopped without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. Ms. Caldwell, thank you for intervening. Officer Miller will be placed on administrative duty pending review of this incident. Administrative duty, Caldwell's voice rose. He racially profiled our employee and prevented him from doing his job. That's not administrative duty material. That's termination material. Ma'am, I understand your frustration. This will be thoroughly investigated. Sergeant, I interjected, my voice firm. I've been working in this city for 15 years. I've never been stopped by police while going to work. Not once. I wear a safety vest because my company requires it for visibility and professionalism. I wear my ID badge because it's protocol. I have keys because I'm trusted by every building I service. And despite all of that, your officer saw me and assumed criminal activity. That's not a training issue, that's bias. And bias with a badge ruins lives. Henderson nodded slowly. You're absolutely right, Mr. Robinson, and I assure you this will be addressed. The body camera footage was downloaded within hours. The dashcam from Miller's patrol car captured the entire interaction. The evidence was undeniable. An officer had stopped a man legally accessing his workplace, demanded identification despite visible credentials, and prevented him from entering based on no articulable suspicious behavior. The department issued a statement that afternoon acknowledging the incident and announcing Miller's removal from patrol duties pending investigation. Apex Facility Solutions and the property management company issued their own joint statement supporting me and condemning the stop. Local news covered the story extensively. Janitorial supervisor stopped while entering workplace. The body camera footage was released and viewed hundreds of thousands of times. I filed a federal civil rights lawsuit 28 days after the incident. The complaint named Officer Brandon Miller, Sergeant Mike Henderson for inadequate supervision, and the City of Atlanta. The allegations were clear and well documented: unlawful detention without reasonable suspicion, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, racial profiling and discrimination, and failure to properly train and supervise officers on constitutional standards. The city's attorneys reviewed the evidence and reached a conclusion quickly. The body camera footage was indefensible. It showed me in work attire with visible identification being stopped while legally accessing my workplace. No crime, no suspicious behavior, no justification. The city settled 13 months after the incident for $100,000. The payment came from the city's liability fund taxpayer money compensating for an officer's bias. Officer Brandon Miller's employment was terminated 11 weeks after the incident. The termination letter was direct. Officer Miller initiated contact with an individual legally accessing their workplace without any reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. He demonstrated racial bias in his assessment of the situation. He detained a person who was clearly identified and authorized to be at the location. His actions violated department policy and constitutional protections. His employment is terminated with no eligibility for rehire. Miller's name entered the National Decertification Index. He would never work in law enforcement again. His appeal was denied after review of the footage. He issued a brief statement: "I made an error in judgment when I stopped Mr. Robinson. I should have recognized the situation for what it was. I accept responsibility." The statement didn't address why he saw a man in a work vest with keys as suspicious, nor did it acknowledge the racial profiling. Should officers be required to complete bias training with independent testing before solo patrol? Comment your thoughts below. I used a portion of my settlement to establish a scholarship fund for children of service workers pursuing college degrees. I continued my work at Apex and became an advocate for workers' rights and police accountability. I gave a speech at a workers' rights conference 16 months after the incident. "I've been in building services for 15 years. I told the crowd. I've cleaned offices, managed crews, built relationships with clients. I take pride in my work. I work nights because that's when janitorial crews operate. I wear my vest and badge because I'm professional." And despite all of that, an officer looked at me and saw a criminal. Not a supervisor finishing his shift. Not a worker doing final quality checks. Not a man with keys to a building I'm paid to access. He saw a black man in a hoodie before dawn and assumed I was breaking in. I had my ID visible. I had keys in my hand. I had a safety vest. What more could I have done to look legitimate? The answer is nothing. Because the problem wasn't how I looked or what I was doing. The problem was his bias. This isn't just about one bad cop. Brandon Miller was 23 with 9 months of experience. He had documented issues during training. He should never have been cleared for solo patrol. The system failed by rushing him onto the street. And that failure cost me my dignity and the city millions. The real tragedy is the system that allows this, that clears officers despite warnings, that prioritizes filling shifts over proper training, that settles lawsuits with taxpayer money instead of addressing root causes. I still work as a janitorial supervisor. I still unlock buildings in the early morning hours to finish my night shift inspections. But now, I carry multiple forms of ID and make sure my phone is recording whenever I see a patrol car. I shouldn't have to do that. No worker should have to document their right to access their workplace. Brandon Miller is 24 now. His law enforcement career lasted less than a year. The decertification ensures he won't work in policing again. Some might feel sympathy, but his choices violated my rights. Every interaction was a choice: to see criminality, to demand compliance, to detain without cause. The real question is whether departments will learn, whether they'll stop clearing officers with documented bias issues, whether they'll prioritize proper training over filling positions, whether workers will be able to do their jobs without being treated as suspects. Because if we don't fix these systems, if we don't address bias before it results in violations, then we're just waiting for the next supervisor stopped at their workplace, the next worker detained for going to work, the next person who learns that doing your job while black can be treated as probable cause. Comment below if you believe any officer who detains someone without articulable, reasonable suspicion should face automatic decertification regardless of the outcome. Because when we allow officers to act on assumptions rather than evidence, when we permit racial profiling dressed up as proactive policing, when we fail to hold departments accountable until lawsuits force change, this is what happens. Workers can't access their workplaces. Supervisors are humiliated in front of clients. Rights are violated for the crime of going to work. And if you believe these stories matter, hit that subscribe button. We're going to keep documenting these patterns. We're going to keep demanding departments properly train officers and terminate those who demonstrate bias. We're going to keep fighting for every worker's right to do their job without justifying their presence. This isn't just about Brandon Miller and me, Andre Robinson. It's about all of us and the standard we accept. Whether we keep allowing officers to stop people based on bias, or whether we finally require them to have actual reasonable suspicion before detaining anyone. Because the cost isn't just settlement money. It's workers who no longer feel safe going to work. It's trust destroyed.